in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity, tomorrow never certain. What was behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble from LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make me get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Are you muted? One second here. Hello, everybody. Let's see here. Let me turn this off. Are you there? Let's make sure this is not me. Okay. Okay, it's not me. All right, I still can't hear you, Ike. I'm not sure what's happening. But everybody like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. We had a great episode of Case Closed this last Sunday. That was on my channel. You can check that out. Also, last week's episode of Getting Ish Done, which was a part 2. Part one was on Ike's channel. Part 2 was on my channel. You can check that stuff out. Become a channel member. All of that good stuff. I think we're there. We go. Maybe not. But anyhow, we're working it. We're working it out. Check.
So, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, I have no idea. A quick Microsoft update got forced upon me, and then right after it, I should move to Apple, huh? But right after that, like the StreamYard microphone. But anyways, without further ado, you guys don't care about our technical difficulties and our problems. Thank you for holding it down there, Dr. Thunder. Shout out to Mr. IC3 in the building. been a while since we've seen you in these parts. And shout out to Princess C. But I'm gonna go ahead now and I think use this phone audio and also how does it sound though overall? I guess.
Yeah. No, it sounds good. I mean, it's it's not an SMB
Yeah,
or whatever,
yeah,
or maybe is it SM? What is it? I don't even remember what it is.
yeah. It's short. I just know it's a
Or
short
what
mic.
is it?
Short SMD something. Yeah.
So, something. It ain't that. It ain't the Rogan mic, but it'll do.
It'll do indeed. It'll do indeed. So, ladies and gentlemen, you guys see the title, right? The title says ethical ambiguity. Okay, ethical ambiguity. And I think we should lay down some facts on the table. First of all, let me try to make the claim here. In other words, let me try to make this sentence comprehensible, and then we'll see whether it actually holds up. That ethical ambiguity is necessary for success. That to succeed at a certain height, at certain high levels that might be considered disruptive, you need to be able to move freely outside of the boxes that incumbent powers have put you in through their code of ethics. Code of ethics serves many times the incumbents, and one of the ways it serves them is to put you, the outsider, in a particular box such that you cannot move and have your own power and success. Okay, so that's what we're saying. That's what we're saying. I mean, one of the extreme, if we move into the realm of morality, right? Some extreme versions of this do exist. The Machiavellian version of just, morality itself. It's there to tie you down. Well, we're not going there. Okay, so morality, we're going to separate from this. We're going to talk about morality, ethics, and the law, just so that we can focus on ethics. Morality, this is not a philosophical conversation. It's not a theological conversation. So we're just going to say Judeo-Christian morality, right? We're going to give it a context and not argue about it. Fair enough, Dr. Thunder? Like 10 commandments, that's what we mean by morality. We're talking about Judeo-Christian morality, right? So that exists. There's something else called the law, which tends to change. You see, that Judeo-Christian morality thing, it tends not to change within this context that we've created it, right? It's not going to change. We know what it is, okay? But then the law changes, and ethics is the most fluid one, and it even changes within organizations. You have the ethics of the lawyers, for example, and then you have the code of ethics that doctors adhere to. You have one for engineers who design buildings and stuff like that. So there's these different codes that are designed to keep order, okay, social order within organizations and professions. So far, so good, Dr. Thunder. Is there anything that you would add to this distinction we're trying to create?
Yeah. So this is interesting because probably more than one previous show, we've talked a little bit about if you're trying to climb in the corporation, say you're entry level, you're in the mailroom, okay, and if you want to climb up the totem pole to be middle management and then VP of something and so on, then you can't really be a bean counter. You can't really be a rule follower, as it were. You have to follow enough rules so that you don't get exiled. You have to be ethical enough, but if you're more concerned about following the rules than you are about your ascent, you will not ascend. And the rules seem to be constructed as a way to, you need a certain number of folks that are just going to be bean counters. And so the rules are kind of for a comfort level for those bean counters. It makes them feel good about, hey, they're following the rules, they're doing X, Y, and Z. The folks that want to climb, they're going to, by nature, likely be a little more loose with the rules. There's that thing that you hear people say frequently. It's better to or easier to ask for forgiveness than for permission, right?
Mhm.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, it now that I see, now that I read the actually read the fine print, I can see what you're saying. I'll make sure that I don't make that mistake again. All right.
So let me reiterate what you say and kind of add something to it here. You're basically saying, hey, the bean counter strict rule follower type is not going to rise. They have a particular path, they have a trajectory. They're not, but there's a glass ceiling for them, right? This is a conversation about glass ceilings at the end of the day. Different glass ceilings. Now, perhaps let me move forward a little bit by adding a particular characteristic that perhaps you would need to have, given what you've said, is that how do you remain ethically ambiguous, but morally untarnished, morally uncompromised? Because if you're morally uncompromised, if you're morally compromised, then this ruins your power base, it ruins your credibility. You will not be able to establish what you're trying to establish, right? So there is a fine line here. This is just going to make this distinction between, morality and ethics, and then there is the law. There is this distinction here that perhaps people have difficulty with, and I think that Andrew Tate, the media saga surrounding him and everything, is a good area to investigate to kind of see that distinction, right? Where legally, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Thunder, that they've been able to get anything on him to stick. I think that there's a 6 months period that they have in Romania to press charges. You can be arrested without there being any real charges, and they still haven't really had anything stick on him, right? So here's
Actually,
someone
he's been indicted.
He's been indicted.
Yeah, just recently. We're talking like hot off the press. Within
Hot
the
off
last
the
couple of
press.
days, he's been indicted.
What they get him with?
Well, it's the sex trafficking and EPAR. That's what he's been indicted for. Him and his brother. But and there's still no more evidence. Right. Money laundering. Right. There's still no more evidence that this stuff has actually transpired. However, I still think that is it so given the angle of the discussion here, is it possible for someone to be found guilty because of an ethical violation but still be morally what do you want to say?
I'm using uncompromised for
you're
the purpose.
uncompromised, right?
So the bean counter exists within a particular world in their mentality, or the mentality is not a good. Can we define what locks that bean counter thinking that the ethics, which is a code of conduct created by people within organizations to keep order, what keeps these people locked in? You mentioned that this bean counter is happy that they're following rules. What state of mind? Perhaps it's blue pilled, right? What is this blue pill state of mind? Can you elaborate? Can we help flesh that out? Take us down that path of this blue pilled rule follower and him feeling good that the higher ups are patting him on the head. Oh, the director of such and such just called me and told me that I did really good on XYZ. This is great, right? Thinking that the director has some kind of special source from the top of the mountain. You know, that the director, like was Moses, went to the top of the mountain and came back down with these code of conduct for you to follow strictly. Let me put some context within here for you, perhaps that you can play with. Some of the things that are at stake here are sharing of information, for example, and what is considered conflict of interest. Take, for example, you're in the director level, and there's some information that you're supposed to have, and that somebody at the bean counter level is not supposed to have that because it's some kind of it's part of the code of conduct. Now, why does the bean counter accept that? Why do they just think, okay, it's okay that I don't have this information and they have this information? This asymmetry of power over me, I should accept not just as part of the way the organization work, but people actually take it into their souls, don't they? Am I wrong, Dr. Thunder?
Okay.
Yo,
There it is. No, you're not wrong. I'd argue that most people, and of course this starts with children, just believe what you say, right? You just tell them do this, and they ask you a question, why can't I do that? And you tell them why, and they may keep asking questions, but they don't have a frame of reference that's wide enough to call you into question, like what if you're telling them the right stuff or not.
mhm,
They're going to just say okay, right? And so in that sense of things, I think most people find comfort in there being this sort of list of rules. Follow these rules and you'll be okay, right? Because the person above me is telling me that, whoever the person is above the person that's above me, they're telling them something that's keeping the continuity of what the person above me is telling me to be the case, right? And all the way up to the top, right?
mhm.
So so I would argue most people, they just want things to stay the same. They don't want anything to upset the apple cart. They don't want to really dig around too much. So it seems that that is, for the most part, satisfactory. However, it's not satisfactory to a certain kind of person, which is not the usual person. And so the challenge with the structure is that it must be set up to disproportionately lean towards creating comfort for those that are going to stay in place. That's where your stability comes from. And then those that are climbers, they're going to be okay with this ambiguity that you're talking about, so long as they have a moral code, a moral framework that see in my mind, I already know that all of the rules that these organizations, these institutions set up, I know at one level they're just made up. It's like the one of my favorite whipping boys, the word budget. You're trying to get a raise, you're trying to get this piece of equipment, you need this piece of equipment to to do some aspect of a vision that you have for a project you're doing or whatever it is. And you say, hey, let's do X, Y, and Z. And it's, we just don't have it in the budget. Now, the bean counter is going to say, well, hey, they said they don't have it in the budget. I'm not going to take it personally. And it's just not in the budget. Hey, it's not, hey, look, see, it's not there. Okay. What I do is I call into question, well, whose budget? Who decided that? Because I'm aware that a budget is just a way to, list your priorities, right? And so what you just told me is that something else is more of a priority than I am. Something is more of a priority than, this project that I want to do, this vision that I have. And if it is what I'm asking for is a raise, someone else's salary is higher on the priority list for you, tightening them up than it is for you to tighten me up. And they can even use stuff like, well, salary compression and such hasn't had a, raise in such amount of time and blah, blah, blah. And they can use all of that language, but ultimately I understand what's really going on. And so I see through that. And I recognize that these are policies set up to keep the stability of the structure. I don't see them as being, if I push against them, as that being a moral infraction.
What's the price you pay, Dr. Thunder? I want to get to the and you can hear me, right? I'm sorry, I just don't see the bubble around. Okay, I want to get into. Okay, so now we mentioned a different type of person who is going to see past this and say, hey, there's a higher order here, and these rules you have here. This is the lower order of rules. You call them made up, right? And just because of the way things are, they're going to be made up to keep a certain order, and that order has incumbents that benefit from that. It's in their interest to keep that order going, right? You push against it, you're going to pay a cost. You are going to pay a cost, right? And I'm going to want to talk about a little bit about that cost because it's important, right? You got to know to be prepared for this. Hey, I'm going to go into this land of ethical ambiguity and understand that codes of conduct are meant to keep incumbents in power. Okay, now what do I have to bring to the table? Because they could chop your head off and they could lay you off. They could say, okay, go ahead, go start your own thing and become my competitor. All these other kinds of things. And it is in line with what Mr. IC3 has on the screen here. What Mr. IC3 is saying is careerism, right? One way of keeping the bean counter in line is promising him through this straight line of steps that he's going to rise through, right, in his career. If he follows these rules and you do exactly what we tell you to do, we will put you in these positions, right? The other track is to say, no, F that. I'm going to do what I want to do, but I'm not going to therefore be depending on, it's going to be a more chaotic world, right? So am I right? More chaos gets introduced into your life when you decide to bulk this, right? You have to be willing to cash those checks that you are putting, you're pushing back. You're going to need to be able to cash the check. In other words, if you get fired, yes, you're going to be able to move from one place to the other. You have enough bona fides, a good enough reputation, good enough backbone, and you're not morally compromised such that you can't start your own thing, blah, blah, blah. What are these costs, Dr. Thunder? You muted, or is there just a massive delay?
Sorry, I was muted. It's one thing's interesting. We're using Tate as a way over there extreme example of someone that has been very, ethics was, he's been very much that way. Okay. And he's been able to get to where he is. Now, there's obviously been a significant pushback. That's the jeopardy attached. That's the, these are the, what is it? The, what wolves in the bushes or whatever. It's the stuff that comes out when you're out there on your own, the elements, and you're susceptible to stuff. Something can happen to you. There's nothing there to protect you. You can't hide under the structure. You can't say, hey, I was following the rules of the structure. Hey, I was just doing what they told me to do. There's nobody to say that to in his sort of situation, right? So, what was I going to say? So, man, I totally lost my train. Say what you were saying before.
Yeah. Okay. So we are talking about the price that you have to pay, the checks that you need to cash,
Okay,
the volatility that you need to have in order to walk this path.
Okay. So, see, it used to be in this context too, because what's happening, Doctor Neil? What is happening? You should mod Ronald Neal, Dr. Neal up.
All right, I'll get to YouTube here.
Yeah. I don't presume to think that I can tell you how to run your channel. In the way that I framed that, it could sound.
I think you already presumed, but go ahead.
Yeah. Maybe Mr. IC3 also. But so it used to be that there were three sort of kinds of folks that their sort of job, their position in society was to push against, the status quo. And though it made us uncomfortable at times, we recognized that was their job. Right. And so these three kinds of folks, you have, comedians and artists. Right. So there's a whole genre of music, though it's using the term genre in a different way. Genre in something in common, but the music is stylistically different, but the purpose of the music is the same, called protest music. Right? Protest music. That's a genre of music and created by those that are artists. And remember, artists are not necessarily experts of social issues, of political, the political process or whatever else. But we accepted that. We said, okay, this is part of it. And then with comedians, same thing. We allow them to tell really edgy jokes and make fun of stuff that, that was kind of commonplace stuff, but that was kind of taboo. And we allowed them to do that. So you have artists and comedians. You have ministers flat out saying, look, the status quo is wrong. What it is that we're doing is wrong. X, Y, and Z, whatever. Okay. And you guys are all going to hell, by the way. Okay. And then, number three, academics. Right. And this is also where the idea of a public intellectual, where that comes from. A public intellectual, a social commentator, right? Someone, again, that may or may not be an expert in all aspects of whatever the discussion we're talking about. However, they're tenured, however they're employed, whatever they teach, that's a side issue in many cases, right? We're talking about their willingness to talk frankly about social issues, right? So it used to be those three kinds of folks. Now, tenure was designed to protect. It's designed to protect, right? And comedians and artists didn't really have that kind of protection, and neither did ministers, but they were still willing to stick their neck out that way. Cancel culture makes this very difficult. So when you talk about somebody like Andrew Tate, you're talking about someone that has been quite ethically ambiguous on his pathway, but he believes in what it is that he's saying. He believes that he's a good force. He's a positive force for humanity. I mean, he says it each time he's interviewed. So he believes that he has a mission and that he's on the right path, as it were. He admits that he's made mistakes and done some things that are questionable. Okay. But he believes that he's on the right path. But he also does not have any structure to protect him. And so this is the danger. This is the danger that's out there. I mean, okay, you can get out there and you can be frank and you can be, specific about and nuanced about the issues in society, X, Y, and Z. But we know now, and today more than ever before, you have folks that are going to come after you. And yeah. So is your morality, your mission, is it important enough for you to be willing to take that risk? So that's the whole that's the whole deal.
That's the whole deal. And see, Elon Musk is another example in the sense that when Elon Musk was just, out there doing what he did and making electric cars, no one seemed to have a lot of smoke for him, right? When he started becoming out, he's always been outspoken, right? But when he started becoming outspoken in places like Twitter and people started paying attention to him and he started poking his eyes in certain places where he shouldn't, poking his hands in people's eyes and whatnot, all of a sudden becomes persona non grata. He's this right-wing extremist. He's a Nazi, crazy. Like you kind of like this. This is rather interesting. So now he has trained himself and built those muscles of being able to cash the checks, put his money where his mouth is, if you will, and fight that battle. Okay. So let's reground ourselves a little bit here. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about ethical ambiguity and success. And we've said, hey, look, there's the land of morality and there's the land of ethics. Morality, we're not going to make a philosophical conversation out of. We're just going to say, hey, we're talking about Judeo-Christian, ethics or morality. But ethics changes within organizations and from time to time, and it's there to keep order and the order of the incumbent structure. Okay, that is what it's about. And if you take this thing and internalize it, if you internalize the ethical codes, you're internalizing yourself being subservient to the order of someone else. And that puts a glass ceiling on you. If you choose to get off that path, not be a bean counter, rule follower, if you understand that these rules, according to Dr. Thunder, are just made up and it's the nature of these social structures to want to maintain themselves. So these rules are going to be in favor of those that are in power, maintaining that order, right? Then be ready to face the wrath of that order. This does not mean that this is, and there's no need to make it some kind of like, oh, I'm a failure in life if this particular group doesn't like me. Because I think that there are people who might struggle with that, right? What will my parents think? Or what would X, Y, or Z think if I get fired from this company, or if I don't follow this beaten path, if I don't become what my dad said I should be? Because this particular thing we're talking about here, people's codes of conduct and their expectations, it runs deep, and it depends on the stage of life you are in. I just talked about parents and them wanting you to do something, for example. I mean, you have a son and you may have not within the realm of morality, but within the realm of, let's say, some kind of occupation or something that you may consider, well, I think you should follow this particular order. And if it's not in his spirit to follow it, he might have to rebel and be like, okay, I'm not going to go there. And then maybe suffer the consequences of dad saying, I'm not going to support you in that path. I think you have a similar story about your dad saying something that you should do, or to go to college and, and you'll get this support. If you don't go, you don't get this support, that kind of a thing, right? So these are decisions that people have to make. Let me shift slightly here as we continue and talk about something that happened at Reddit. And this thing that happened at Reddit is the mods at Reddit rebelling against the ownership team of Reddit. The mods create the value, okay? The mods create the value at Reddit. They create the content. And there is an ownership team who wants to exert control. And this is all related to AI in the sense of that Reddit has a lot of data, great training data for some AI. So Reddit is not considered part of like the open internet. It's a closed system. They're going to want to charge these AI bots out there to come and get trained on this good Reddit data, right? But the mods are like, nope, you're not going to monetize this data without our say, our input, and us getting our cut. Okay. Now, what the mods are doing will be considered unethical by some rule book somewhere about, well, we own this, that, or the data, we own your blah, blah, blah. But really, who has control in this situation? It's the mods, right?
Look, all
And this,
strikes and civil disobedience is all unethical.
mm-hmm. Good one to put there. All strikes and civil disobedience is unethical. Okay. So therefore, should we, that's a good point. Let me just play this little clip here, and then we're going to get into we're going to go back into the organization, right? And how this all plays out. And I'm going to give some 3 points in a triangle of power within an organization, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. So here's David Friedberg. Shout out to David Friedberg from the All In podcast.
From her role as CEO when this happened. So, because so much of the value of Reddit isn't in the management team, it's not in the work that the software engineers do that run the company, it's not the VCs or the shareholders. The value of
By the way, I think a CEO got fired was one of the things that there was a previous time when this thing happened when they actually did get a CEO fired from Reddit because of what she did. Okay, but let me go a little bit backwards and see if I can catch that part while I play this.
Q&A site for Reddit's mods and their users, and the network, the community was super pissed off when this happened, and they all revolted and they were going to shut down the service. And ultimately, Ellen, got removed from her role as CEO when this happened. So, because so much of the value of Reddit isn't in the management team, it's not in the work that the software engineers do that run the company, it's not the VCs or the shareholders. The value of Reddit is inherent in the community. It's inherent in the individuals that build the content on that platform. And that community has convened many times in the past at Reddit to change the rules, to say, this is what we want this community to become, and this is how we want this management team to operate. And so it's a really uniquely positioned business. Says a lot about how social networks in this kind of modern era are operating. It really speaks to how much of the value ultimately accrues to the shareholders in a business like this, when the users themselves can step in and unionize and say, hey, you know what? We're not going to allow this much value to be pulled out of the network in this way. We want this to change. So I think it'll have a lasting effect in terms of investing in social network or social media type businesses where the users are generating so much of the value and have the ability to kind of communicate with one another and control where value ultimately falls.
Chamath, you were at Facebook.
All right. It's interesting that he mentioned unionize, because unionization is one of the manifestations of this particular thing that we're talking about. Because in one sense, if we go back into the organization, it's about the relationship of capital and ownership to labor, right? So in this case, the value, the labor of Reddit is being done by these communities, the Reddit communities, the Redditors and the moderators. And they're putting in the work. And if they choose to say, hey, this is an important part of the value chain, we're going to negotiate, we're going to unionize. And by unionization, we mean form a concrete negotiating block, right? In other words, state clearly, concisely, and uniformly our demands in order to continue to play our role in this value chain here called Reddit, or called any organization, right? Now, there are many ways in which this happens, but I just want to state that within any organization, there's always ownership, there's control, and then there's possession. It's a kind of a basic MBA type organizational structure, organizational organizational studies type of structure there, but it makes a lot of sense. If you are a one-man team, okay, you are Dr. Thunder Incorporated, you own the business, okay, that's the ownership part of the triangle. You also control the business, you're the board of directors, you get to write the bylaws and stuff. And you also have possession of the business, meaning that you are the labor itself. You're doing the stuff. Possession in this case means that you have the keys to the door. You go, you open the door, and you go into the office, right? You have the contacts to the clients, right? You built the relationship with the clients. Now, here's the thing. The ownership level, when you blow up an organization, it's no longer Dr. Thunder Inc., but now it's an organization of 50 people, right? These three things, ownership, right? Control, right? And possession, start to separate from each other. And control, which is the board of directors, is always trying to try to accrete the things that the possession people are getting. In other words, that contact that you develop with that particular customer, they want to say that it's theirs, right? They want to say, oh, it's not really your, it's not that customer's number, the phone number, it's not your number, it's not in your phone, it's our information. Again, I talked about one of the tangible aspects of this whole power dynamic is in the control of the flow of information. Same thing that we see with Reddit, right? Reddit is trying to sell stuff to the AI people and they get revolted on, right? So you are a salesperson. You're in that possession labor part of the triangle. You go out there, you make contacts, you do things, you bring in business, but the management, which is in that control side, they write codes of conduct and ethics that make you think, right? Like at least kind of create that illusion, but it's just a proposal as far as you're concerned. If you're this type of person that says these things are made up, they propose, okay, that information or that work, that possession you have of the client's information and their name and the relationship and you delivering the goods, that somehow it's their property, okay? And you haven't turned around and said yes or no, or maybe let me trade, right? And most people do not turn around and trade. I'm going to say one thing and I want you to react to it, Dr. Thunder, react to everything else I've said, is that one of the ways to move more into this area where the control people, which is the directors, right? The directors. I'm not talking about the owners because typically the owners are very separate from this. The owners, typically when the organization gets big enough, are shareholders. The owners are diffuse. The owners are not even in the room. They just are collecting their dividends, right? Or the owners are somewhere in Liechtenstein in some tax haven driving Lamborghinis, right? So there's sometimes they've created their trust fund and they're kind of away. You have the directors, whom are the control people, and then you have the possession people, and this is the fight that goes on. So one way to really make it clear what the power that you have is to get closer to the money. In other words, get closer to the client. In other words, get to something where that is similar to sales. We know that partners in a law firm are not lawyers, they're salespeople. Okay. In other words, they have the direct possession of the client's purse strings. Okay. That is why control can't tell them nothing, right? The board can say whatever they want, but I'm going to leave tomorrow with my client because trust me, we're still human beings. And I'm now sticking with a very narrow example here about a client relationship, right? A client relationship for somebody that is a salesperson who has risen up. And rather than be just a cost, like a light bulb, I'm just a cost over here. I'm like an engineer that just does stuff. You want to go to a place where you have actual possession of something where you're like, okay, I bring in these clients or I serve these clients in a particular way. They're here because of me, or this organization could not operate because of me, the way the Redditors are doing, right? And there are positions within any organization that are closer to that than the light bulb. The light bulb is the other extreme I use. Like you're just a cost, you're just a thing, you're just a cog in the wheel, can be repeated, but when you go closer to what the Redditors are, whom create the value or whom are selling, have the purse strings, then then you start to see that all that ethical stuff they say, it all gets like, it's just a tactic because they won't throw that ethical book at you when they know that you own the biggest clients and you can leave with them and go start your own stuff. What are your general thoughts about what I've mentioned here? Again, there's a triangle of ownership. They're typically out of the room. And then you have control, which is this board of directors. And then you have the possession people, the people who are actually doing the work. What are your thoughts?
Stop legislating your morality. Yeah. So that's an expression we hear frequently when people desire a different legal ruling on something, a different policy, they want the Supreme Court to say this is now illegal, this is legal, this is permitted, this is not permitted. And the problem with the legislating morality, stop legislating your morality, you should never legislate morality, is that the legal system is really kind of based on the Ten Commandments, right? And the Ten Commandments being a system, in one sense, an ethical code, but on the other sense is actually morals, as literally emanating from the throne of God, right? The moral lawgiver, right? The only reason why something ultimately is either right or wrong, is either allowable or not allowable, does it emanate from the throne, right? So all of these issues, all of these sort of nuanced points that we're talking about, and even the point that I made about how, unionizing and civil disobedience, and even telling a crude joke or protest music or being a public intellectual and calling question to many social practices, the way that black men and boys are treated. You're supposed to just lay down and take it. You're not supposed to actually say anything, right? It's unethical, it's uncouth even, right, to enter, to dispute, to push back against certain things. But it also is the American way, and it's what makes this country different than other countries, other iterations even of democracy. It's what makes it different. The sort of bean counter type would look at some passages, and I think it's one of Paul's letters, and he says, you do, what is it? You follow the law of the land, because no law is there except for, God allowed it to be there. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, but that's the principle. Now, here's where I think a lot of bean counters get it wrong. This is a lot of normies, a lot of ham and eggers. This is where they get it wrong. They get it wrong because when the Bible was written, under the system of government that existed, where there was a king, and the king, whatever he said, that's what went, and the king is what the people asked for, so God allowed the king to rule. And so now you must follow. We are not in a kingdom sort of setup. We're not in a monarchy sort of setup. We're in a representative democracy in a republic. And what that means is that we actually get to establish what the rules are. We get to say, this is what the rules are going to be. And so it's different for me to specifically single out a particular policy, law, rule, code of conduct, and intentionally disobey it. That is not the same as me violating God's law. Right? There is a sort of social contract, an agreement that we have. It may be poking at the social contract. And it may actually come to the point of even breaking the social contract. But it's not immoral. It's not immoral. You know, it's funny because speed limits, right? Everybody knows what the speed limit is. You're driving, it says 55. How many people are going 55 miles an hour? I don't know. Probably some ham and egg or normie, bean counter, whatever, is probably going exactly 55 miles an hour. But a bunch of folks are not going 55 because they've learned that what 55 actually means in practice is probably no more than 65. And yes, you can get a ticket. And yes, you can pay a fine. And yes, if you're going enough over that speed limit, you can do time in jail. That's true. But you could do time in jail for something like that. Or, for instance, Wesley Snipes. He was part of an income tax protest group. And he decided that he was not going to pay income tax. And he was resolute about it, and he did time in jail. He broke the law, and he did time in jail, but it wasn't immoral. Okay, now there are some breakages of laws which are immoral. So if you murder someone, that's immoral. Okay, but you understand there's a lot of these other policies in other rules and laws and stuff. Helmet laws. I think I brought this up on, it might have been on Case Closed or something. It's ringing in my ear, like I just brought this up on a show. But helmet laws, okay, for a motorcycle and for like mopeds. Okay, Michigan, the state of Michigan just recently repealed its helmet laws. Why did it repeal its helmet laws? It had helmet. Look, I grew up in Michigan, and it had helmet laws all the way until way after I left Michigan. And only recently, within the last couple of years, did they repeal the helmet law. But why did they repeal the helmet law? Because people protested. Civil disobedience. Matter of fact, every year they would have a bikers rally where nobody would wear a helmet, violating the law. Nobody would wear a helmet, and they would all drive up to the Capitol, the state capitol in Lansing. This huge bunch of bikers, nobody has helmets on. They did that every year. And what happened? There's no helmet law anymore. Right? So I just think I think there's some nuance here, but it's pretty easy to see that there is a need for people to push back against the status quo. And if folks are just afraid of doing that, I mean, a certain kind of person is just going to stay in line. But there are some that will push back, and God bless them for being willing to push back, because things would be exactly the same as they always were, just as bad as they were if folks didn't push back.
I would like to play a little bit more from that video regarding the Reddit thing, because I think now we can see, because one of the things that was mentioned was, well, what does it mean for the control group, right? The group that's trying to control, and their ability to get capital from, quote unquote, now this would be an ownership group, because we're talking about selling of shares. They want to suck money out by monetizing the work of the Redditors, right? Now, if the Redditors are like, no, we're not part of this negotiation. So now what does the control group do? Because one of the things that Friedberg said was, because he represents the capital class, the ownership class, whom as I said, these guys typically are not even, these are not the people that you're beefing with at a certain level. These are the people you're trying to be. Okay. These are not your enemies. You wanna rise up and be them with your own cause. Right? You're not duplicating them, right? You want to be the person's, with controlling both capital, labor, and all that kind of stuff for your own purposes. You're saying, hey, look, these control group people can't really convince me now to give me their money if they are not actually in control, right? If the Redditors, then I should be negotiating with the Redditors then, right? Or this thing gets so decentralized that maybe I cannot have this kind of unitary investment vehicle anymore where it's just investing in one thing, where things get tokenized. Now I'm getting a little jargony and getting into the decentralized world with regards to the blockchain and whatnot. But the idea of tokenization is the idea of being able to, rather than take my money and invest in one big thing, I'm going to invest in pieces of things or buy a little piece of something and stuff like that. But let me play a little bit more of this.
So I think it'll have a lasting effect in terms of investing in social network or social media type businesses where the users are generating so much of the value and have the ability to kind of communicate with one another and control where value ultimately falls.
Chamath, you were at Facebook, I think, when Zuckerberg realized enabling a bunch of folks to use the API wasn't as good as controlling the user experience, having a uniform user experience. And it got deprecated. And I remember Zynga and a bunch of other people had games and were sucking users off the platform. There was a LinkedIn competitor at one point that was growing.
He's describing now how Facebook in the earlier years had to deal with this issue of things kind of getting a little too decentralized. They're allowing other people access their API, which is another way of other software, other companies coming in, offering things to people on Facebook, sucking them out of Facebook, making this kind of decentralized thing. And Facebook dealt with that earlier on by, you put the kibosh on it.
At a incredibly violent pace. And I guess y'all made a decision. We don't want you sucking our user base off the platform. Maybe you could expand on what the decisions were at Facebook at the time.
That was one of the...
And this is Chamath Palihapitiya. He was an early Facebook guy, billionaire now, mainly because he was an early Facebook guy.
Things I ran, I think.
Hey,
one of my teams was responsible for Facebook.
Go ahead.
Did old dude have an MF Doom?
Well, where?
Right behind. Look at that. Is that?
Oh, yeah, right there. Yeah, he's. I guess. There you go.
Yeah.
Next to. He's trying to get all kinds of cred.
Let's go.
You see, he's got you. He's got you. Yeah. Interesting.
Were at Facebook at the time.
That was one of the things I ran, I think. One of my teams was responsible for Facebook platform. Yeah, it was just a very clinical decision around enterprise value. Look, the thing with Reddit is that it's a hot mess. And in order to try to create enterprise value, they decided to really leverage the mods so that there was some level of control. And that control was necessary so that they could basically sell ads. That's how this.
Again, just repeating what I said. That okay, I'm gonna leverage the people whom have possession. The mods, the doing the work, and so that I have some kind of control, so that I can get capital from quote unquote, for the owners and from the owners. In this case, the owners are like, it's a publicly traded company, so I get to be the voice. And he uses the word enterprise value. There's value there, but how do I make it enterprise value? Is when I create a vertical, call it Reddit. It's a unit, and I claim ownership of this value, and I go out there into the market and I sell it. Right now, all that is not written in heaven that has to happen. No, the people whom are being leveraged, the Redditors, do have a say. But many times, people don't realize that they're in this group of the real value that look, the directors of your company, whatever, work in this massive company or whatever, they don't actually have the relationship with the clients or know what is going on with regarding to project X, Y, or Z, or A, B, and C, right? They don't.
And that control was necessary so that they could basically sell ads. That's how this thing moved in lockstep, because the minute that there was corporate venture investors and other investors and a need to generate enterprise value, and is it worth 2 billion or 5 billion or 10 billion, whatever the number was that they thought they were worth, they had to make money, right? And Huffman was very straightforward about that and wanting to go public and the whole 9 yards. But because it was such a hot mess, the mods became this integral part of the ecosystem so that they could actually drive reasonable revenue. But then what happened was it also allowed them to basically take over. And I think that it was a pretty significant miscalculation, because I think that what they needed to do was really redefine the economics of how.
Again, Chamath is talking from the point of view of the control guys, right? Like how, because obviously they have a say too, right? Like, and they're not idiots, at least the good ones, right? This is all a chess game. And obviously he's speaking, right? I don't know if you have any points to make here, Dr. Thunder, before I continue regarding what he's saying. But he's speaking from a rather dispassionate point of view. He's not saying, oh, how dare they try to, it's like, okay, cool. You've made your move. Now, how do I continue in with my goal of creating quote unquote enterprise value and selling this thing out there for a few billion? Any thoughts so far?
No, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, and it makes total sense why he's not incensed by this, because he's not a normie. He's not a bean counter, not a ham and egger, right? He understands how this thing works, and he himself, in order to get to the place where he is, was one of the rabble rousers, and was one of the ambiguous, ethical, ethically ambiguous guys. So yes,
indeed. And shout out to Mr. S over here also talking. Yeah, he also copped Bitcoin quite early too, a lot of it, and now he's a straight up venture capitalist, kind of running his own money in a fund. And he also did a lot of what they call SPACs, special purpose acquisition companies. It's a way of taking smaller companies public. He's done many moves, and a lot of people claiming ethical ambiguity. In other words, he's actually the perfect guy for this, because if you just want to look up Chamath 8, oh my God, all kinds of people like, oh, Chamath said this was gonna happen, then that happened, like, and he takes it in stride and he just keeps on going like, yeah, I'm here to continue to add more billions to my billions. If you're he calls them mids. The normie ham and egger, his term for his mid. I like it. It's kind of interesting. He calls them mids. If you're a mid out there, not understanding what's going on, that's your problem. But yeah, a lot of people don't like him. Anyways, let me continue.
I think that it was a pretty significant miscalculation, because I think that what they needed to do was really redefine the economics of how revenue generation splits would work before they could do all of this stuff and try to monetize the APIs. So I think they got the order of operations wrong, but I also think it's very fixable. And I think that they have some very smart people around that table. So as long as they're, again, willing to be clinical and unemotional like we were, they'll get to the right answer, which is give them a healthy rev share. That's the future. Freeberg,
he's ready to negotiate, right? He's I mean, so and I think this is a good representation of the control guys, right? Like, in other words, it's not a devil, it's not a demon. He wanted his. You outsmarted him in a certain stage in the game, and now he's ready to negotiate. He's talking about giving them a rev share, right? Let's see.
So as long as they're, again, willing to be clinical and unemotional like we were, they'll get to the right answer, which is give them a healthy rev share. That's the future. Freeberg, what version of what Freeberg said is true. The content creators need to get paid. Why? You see content creators now on YouTube making millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, in a few unique cases, billions. And then we are all content creators, yet most of us on these old legacy platforms make nothing. So that exchange has to change.
Brad, any thoughts? Will this derail the IPO?
Not on that, but I mean, I think, you bring up this thing about Meta, did anybody pay attention to, Zuck's launching Project 92, right? And Project 92 is going to take on Twitter.
Oh, interesting other thing that Zuck is doing. I didn't know that Zuck was about to take on Twitter with the text-based social network. Did you know about this, Dr. Thunder?
I did not.
Okay, well, let's we'll keep our eyes peeled on that one there, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, I wanted to continue that because I wanted to see what Chamath was going to say from the side of the control. And I think he was rather clinical about it. As he said, he was clinical when they did it in Facebook, when they put the kibosh on it. Facebook was early, didn't allow the people to actually get power. As it's still evidence by now, right? Like, YouTube, he gave it as an example of a good model of sharing, right? YouTube, Google in general does share more in terms of the rev share than Facebook. Okay. And Facebook has more centralized, controlled type of thing that they're doing. And Chamath is saying, hey, look, this is the way to go forward. And this is also the future, blah, blah, blah. But I know you already made some comments about it, but anything else to add regarding Chamath's response here?
Yeah. I mean, he even said, use the expression unemotional, that they were unemotional about it or whatever, as long as they were unemotional about it, So I just thought that kind of underlines again the point previously made.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I didn't know what he was gonna say exactly. But one of the reasons why I like Chamath, if I just kind of recommend him a little bit, is he is one of these get to the crux of an issue and articulate it to people, right? So an intuitive guy, obviously, and then, but good with just giving you the base, like, here's what it is, here are the chips on the table, here's the ways it could go, here's what I did this. And that's one of the things people don't like about him, is how Machiavellian he is. Like, oh, he was part of the people that you stole money from the people. You're the reason why Facebook is the way it is right now, right? That's what people will say, right? Now, let me ask you, Dr. Thunder, what do you think about that response? Like, oh, people now they look at your mouth and be like, oh, but why did you stop it from happening at Facebook if you think it's the right? What is your response to that kind of move by a ham and egger out there?
Wait a minute. So right. Explain it.
Yeah. So Chamath was able to put a stop to this at Facebook. It didn't allow the users to gain before the users gain power, right? Before the control, the actual content creators gain power in Facebook. He put a kibosh on it. Now he's saying, okay, cool. Here's what Reddit is. Yeah, here's what Reddit is, and this is the wave of the future. Here's the type of comments that come back at Chamath exactly of this type. They say, oh, how can you say it's good and it's the wave of the future to give content creators their stuff, but you killed it in Facebook, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, he's supposed to do that.
He's supposed to, yeah, that's why he got his billions. He did that, got his billions. And anyways, go ahead.
I sometimes, like, when people again, it's like there's like a lack of nuance. You can believe that something, it just depends on what your role is. If your role is as the content creator, what are we calling the mod or whatever, if that's who you are, then yeah, you're going to say, yeah, I want to get my money. If you're the overlord and you're going to get a bonus, then you're supposed to say, you're supposed to do what's necessary to get the bonus. Outside of actually doing something that is immoral, right? Then you can get into the sort of nuance about how much money, a living wage and these filthy rich, bloated administrations and blah blah blah, and they're top heavy and they're getting all this money, and the actual work is being done by the people on the ground and they're not getting any. You can have that conversation, that's fine. But whose job is it to make that conversation elevate and rise to the point where they have to actually address it? Is it the people that are on the top that are raking in the dough and of course want to keep it that way? Or is it the people that are on the ground that stand to actually benefit from that? And again, the beauty of our form of government is so that through civil disobedience, which is unethical, we can impose our will, strengthen numbers. We can impose our will. And if we're the only game in town, then they got to play ball. But you risk there being some other folks that can do the same thing you can do and will work for half the money you were working for that you were complaining about. That's also a risk.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they don't speak any English, but they get the job done.
Indeed. You see, Mr. IC3 asked a question here about money and emotional clinical. Now, most people, yes, cannot be unemotional about quote unquote money, what you call money, money, power, resources, right? That kind of a thing. Chamath and this whole conversation emphasizes the need to be emotional, unemotional, clinical, and whatnot, in order to actually wield and possess power. You have to be unemotional, for example, in a certain kind of unattached from the jump regarding these codes of ethics created by others to begin with, right? That's the, before you even get into. Go ahead.
I have to say something to this. So that's true and false, or it can be right and wrong at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you're so broke that that 5 cents more on your paycheck would mean that one of your kids didn't go hungry, okay, then perhaps you're going to get emotional. All right. If you're contemplating, well, if I don't get this bonus, I might not be able to get that second Bentley, then you can probably be more easily be unemotional. Because you probably don't actually need a second Bentley. Like, you're not going to die if you don't have a second Bentley. So you can kind of, on a sort of basic level of needs sort of spectrum, a little bit is like a huge deal to someone that doesn't have anything or has very little. To someone that is, has a lot of money, that same amount of money or magnitude's greater, they're not going to have it because they have their basic stuff is set up, and it's not really going to cause a.
I like that you bring this up, because when I saw the comment on emotional, I was going to do something, but I decided not to do it. It's similar to what you're doing now. In other words, I was going to like set certain parameters, right? You've created this kind of gradient between, the effect, of an emotion, of a financial decision that it has on you. Okay. The effect that it has on you, varying quite widely from I'm completely broke, 5 cents means a lot, huge effect, to it doesn't really matter more. So there's this variance from no money to having a lot of money with regards to the effect that financial decisions has on you, right? And then I was also go ahead
and just think about the difference in stress level.
Oh yeah, 100%. I was also going to then add the other aspect of this unemotional part, which is perhaps too nuanced, but it's not. It's just a on or off, in the sense that there is the effect that it has on you, and then there is the response, which you can also call an emotional response versus not. Right? You get what I'm saying? So, and it is never, in this regard, it is never good to have an emotional response to things, no matter how effective, how acute or high the effect is on. Like, oh my God, no, 5 cents. But you don't want to react emotionally. You might not get that 5 cents if you actually react emotionally, right? So I wanted to kind of, obviously, these are the set of parameters that we're working with here.
It's obvious. It's obviously true that, you know, and part of what you're talking about is like a poker face. You know, you can't kind of let them know what you're actually feeling. Like you're like, what it reminds me of is the Michael Scott Paper Company. So in The Office, Michael Scott decides he's going to go out on his own, and he is able to convince Pam to go with him, because Pam was just tired of being a receptionist, and she was getting promoted to being a salesman if she went with Michael. So then the Ryan, who actually was a CEO and got arrested because he was fraud. You know, he committed fraud while he was in the you know, up in the high office. He had an MBA and he got promoted to, what was it, like COO or something like that. So he got arrested, but Michael just loves Ryan, so he goes and hire him. Ryan is working at a bowling rink. He's at a bowling arena. So so he hires him. And so some kind of way, basically they're able to make it seem as though they have all of this value because they went and they were poaching Dunder Mifflin's clients and undercutting, and they're actually doing what they were doing in a way that was not actually sustainable. But Dunder Mifflin was losing so much money that they ended up being called back in for a meeting, and they say, look, we want to buy you out. And at first they kind of lowball them, and, you know, they were okay, you know, then they give them this huge offer, but and, you know, so they tried to hold, you know, they tried to keep the poker face, and then, you know, then they close the blinds in the conference room. Nobody's in there. Then they're celebrating and stuff, and it's all loud and stuff. Everybody can hear them anyway. So then when they come back in, you know, it's yeah. So they decided some other terms, and they just wanted their jobs back. So they didn't take the money. They just wanted their jobs back. So anyhow, that was a long way. I like to get The Office in there, but yeah, you have to have a poker face when you're trying to do these sorts of negotiations. If you don't have that ability, regardless as to how much your stomach is growling, it's going to limit your ability to, you know, get those. It's not going to be convincing. It's going to seem like you're desperate, and nobody wants to, you know, be making a deal with somebody that's desperate, because it just makes it seem like something's wrong. Like, why are you so desperate? You know, here, let me get you a sandwich or something. You know, let's talk again. You know,
desperation, overabundance of supply. These things make things cheap, right? You want to hoard, you want to be seen as valuable. Desperation is just it's just too much. Like, yeah, it's too much. I'm just giving it for free. It's just I want it. It doesn't. It's never
I'll do anything.
Yeah, it's never
I'll
valuable.
shine your shoes for you.
So the path to going from the place where you have no money, where it's 5 cents makes a huge difference, the path from there to where you don't care anymore is filled with a lot of poker face and unemotionality, right? So that's kind of like my answer to IC3 here about this whole kind of money thing, is that if you want to actually keep the money, and play at the different higher and higher levels, because it's about a series of glass ceilings, right? It's not that everybody needs to. Everybody's like, oh yeah, sure, you can go ahead and be emotional and make emotional decisions, and also not have a poker face and stay within the level which, again, most people stay in, and that's is what it is, right? However, if you want to play, and here's something, for example, just to talk about investment and how important it is, this whole concept of being unemotional to growing a lot of money. Even at the highest levels of, doing this venture capitalist thing, which Chamath does, one of the simple principles that exists, and if you're just a regular day trader trading some cryptocurrency, or if you're a high level venture capitalist kind of putting money in stuff, and Airbnb just doubled in value. Here's an interesting thing, Dr. Thunder. I want you to kind of, and everyone listening, here's the idea about how emotions really screw you up, and how you have to all these checks around in order to block your emotions so that you can continue to be successful in trading and money management. It's a whole huge thing about the whole practice of trading, investment money stuff. It's about strategies for blocking your emotions. We all have different aspects of our emotions that screw us up. So my strategy is going to be different from yours, right? You have your weakness that you're trying to block from killing your money versus mine. In there lies the difference in different strategies. It's just basically the differences in psychological makeup. So here's what I'm trying to describe. Okay, you put $100 in Facebook. Okay, when Facebook was $90 about a year ago. Now Facebook is about 180. Now you've made 200. Okay, there's a huge difference between you leaving the $200 in there in the Facebook stock versus you taking it, putting it in your bank account, and then deciding to put it back in Facebook. Let me repeat that again. And you probably already got it, Dr. Thunder, but there's a huge emotional difference. You say what do you decide to do with the $200 is the question. What's the prudent thing to do? How do I think unemotionally? One way is to leave it in the stock and continue to watch it. Oh, it rose another 5 cents today, or you just take it away, put it in your bank, and then say, now would I put $200 in Facebook? You get the difference? And you know that those things from a objective point of view, it's like, what's the difference? It's still just $200, but emotions are such. And again, it doesn't matter. This is something that Chamath said last week. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to graduate out of this level. It's like, no, it's still a common practice in order to not let your emotions get in the way, to take the $200 out, put it in your bank account. Now that it's sitting in your bank account, do I want to own $200 worth of Facebook? Does that make sense, Dr. Thunder? What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It makes sense. And yeah, it makes sense. I was going to say something else, but I'll wait. Dr. Neil has an interesting question. I don't know question if you see that.
Yeah, Dr. Neil, did you have a ready? Let me say something, and then you can address it. So this is one of those things where it's like,
that's not the question I was talking about, but I was talking about the one above that. I think.
Yeah, my bad. Yeah, I didn't even look at it. Right. Yeah. So yeah, this one. Let me say something real quick. Or did you already have like a canned response to throw at him here with it?
No. You go first, and I do have something I was thinking.
Okay, so it's a good question, right? And it's like one of those questions that I think that should be asked by everybody. My answer is, your sense of what is moral, in other words, what your standard is, below which everything is quote unquote made up, according to you, Dr. Thunder, right? So you have all these different orders of codes of conduct and rules. There is a highest one that you have. You need to be very clear about that. And then understand all the other things that are quote unquote made up, such that all imaginings of your possible futures and actions and this and that are going to be completely morally uncompromised, because you know the highest level. And when you know the highest level in the way in which I'm talking about, it is not just a mental knowledge. It is part of your emotional being too. It is also part of what, and by emotional I mean that kind of feeling of value, what you value, what you would, what will give you peace and joy, right? That term that Dr. Thunder likes, right? So it's not, so when you imagine a good future and the kinds of things the kind of maybe battles you may have to fight, I'm answering for myself, and that's why I use the word imagine a lot. So there's a lot of imaginings in my world, in terms of the kinds of things that I would have to do to get to the places that I would have to get to. Those stories should be very clear in your head, such that you're not going to be in some place that, oh, does this violate this, that? It's like, because I already have the highest. There's already the sun in the sky. I already know where the sun is, and all these things that I'm imagining, and all the things I will have to do, and all the possible futures that could happen, are not going to violate me being right with the sun, if you will. That is the way in which I deal with that. I think it should be answered by everybody. It's something that again, that is my response. It's not answering your question directly as to, well, what morale will I violate, because I don't think that it should come in. You should not be. You should already know. And if you don't know, in other words, if, let's say, for example, even if your answer is, I'm going to be completely Machiavellian, I'm going to be completely an antisocial amoralist, right? You should know that up front too, and all the future imaginings of all the possible futures of all the world, it should include that, right? Like, it should be like, oh yes, I will kill that secretary and bury her in order to get that 4 billion. You should know that completely up front, okay? It shouldn't be this kind of like weird, twiddling your thumb. That's my don't be a BAN response. Go ahead, Dr.
Yeah. So it's interesting. This question is kind of like a make yourself a wealthy person selling crack cocaine to your community, and then flipping it into a hip hop career, rapping about selling drugs and killing Negroes, and then becoming a billionaire. Is it worth it? Is those obvious, adding to the delinquency of a society, significantly contributing to the dysfunction in the Black community? Is that worth you being worth $1 billion? Being worth $1 billion. So there's that. There's the almost verging on the devil's contract. Sign this contract in blood. We'll come back later and take our take our piece of your soul, or whatever.
I hate to just interrupt you, Dr. Thunder, but one of the things about this question is that it harkens back to something that we mentioned earlier about, or was it behind the scenes? I don't know if we actually said it during the show right now, about there is a place where people are at right now, which is most people are boxed within some code of ethics and systems that are designed to keep incumbents in there. And we're asking them to recognize that and start to step towards a different direction. The destroy your community for $1 billion question is way on the extreme, right? And that's kind of like one of my, it's like, okay, it's like situational ethics, right? Where you, what would happen if, most people will never get there. You're never going to be in a situation where you're asking these crazy, morally ambiguous. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, perhaps an aspect of this is not altogether morally ambiguous. Not just breaking the law, killing brothers, putting the crack in the pipe of a single mother. There's certain things that we'll just say, okay, that those things are immoral. And if you're able to pull yourself up by that method, is it worth it? Now, to your point earlier, understanding, having a view of how your morality sort of coexists with these sort of ethical dilemmas in a way that you're comfortable with, cool, that gives you at least a way to justify and make sense of something so you can sleep at night, as it were, right? And I'm not saying that in a in a negative sense or anything. I'm saying that I think everybody has to do that. But there are certain things that are clearly immoral and clearly wrong. You're clearly doing something to someone else, destroying their life for you to benefit, to use them as a stepping stone, this kind of thing. And at what level is that okay? Or is it never okay? Now, I'd argue that it's never okay. And that's why I call it immoral and not unethical. It might also be unethical, but it's also immoral. So I think that there's an area where where there is, what am I saying? Where something can be both immoral and unethical, but in many cases, laws, codes of conduct, policy, there's a long list of things, what you're going to be fined, speed limits. There's a long list of things that I would not put those in the immoral category for violating. Right. And so I sleep great. I drive, 10 miles an hour over the limit. I sleep like a baby. It doesn't have any impact on me because I don't believe that I'm doing anything immoral. There's, and there's something here too. I did a video a long time ago. It was one of my Car Thunder episodes, and it was, what did I say? Here's why, what did I say? Here's why cussing and breaking the law is not a sin, or something like that. It was some real crazy. It was some crazy title like that, right? But my point was, and I was going in on that, if you're driving over the limit, is that immoral? Is, a long list of things, especially in America, where we vote on the law. We vote on policy. We put the people in there that we want to change stuff, to change the laws. So how is it possible for it to be actually a violation of some godly policy of God's law, as it were, when we're the ones that are putting these laws in place? They're not a structure. They're not emanating from the throne of God. It's just what we're saying at the time. What we just happen to believe. Hey, at one point in time, you could own slaves. Hey, you can't do that anymore. Now, there was a problem with that. Now, that was also immoral. Okay, but the point is that is that the laws change, and so I don't believe it to be. It may be inconvenient to have a bunch of people, breaking the laws and doing whatever, and having the thought to themselves, hey, this is not immoral. It might not be convenient for society, but if we're going to come up with some clear categories, That's clearly not immoral. It's just you just whatever. And then the thing about the use of language, there's no specific list of words, in the Bible that you're not supposed to utter, right? There's no specific list of words. And matter of fact, even if they were, they ain't in our language. So explain to me how certain words are these are the out words and these are the in words. Now granted, we can say, okay, it's probably not the best thing to use profane words in descriptions of things that are profane, especially in certain settings. Okay, I'm with that. But that's still not a hard and fast rule. That's like a conduct kind of thing. And it's possible that conduct what's expected conduct could change over time. Right? And so there's a reason why I'm not offended if somebody talks to me and they use colorful language. Okay, that's just the way they communicate. They're not, I don't see it as cussing. And cussing that ain't even what we're talking about. What's cussing? What's cuss? I'm going to cuss you out. What is cuss? Curse is a thing. If you want to talk biblically, curse is a thing. But curse is more like you'll never amount to anything. Like telling somebody they'll never amount to anything. That's a curse. Right? But there's specific prohibition against using the Lord's name in vain. Okay. I'll go with that.
Getting into the moral or the misunderstandings of normies regarding the things that they want to be, want to project this. People like to control and be busybodies, and they will find all kinds of ways to do it, and also justifications. And this cussing stuff is. Now I get it that there's some people that it might be an actual confusion for them. But here I am doing my thing of I always start by just seeing bad behavior and limits, and then I don't engage. I see a limit in somebody that is talking about cussing in the way in which you're trying to dissuade them. I don't think there's any saving that person. Like a limit / bad behavior. In other words, that they're motivated by this kind of control stuff. In which case, go talk to a therapy or I feel bad for your family or whoever has to deal with you and your bad behavior. It's not going to be me. Okay. That's kind of how I just see most people who, this is almost a side conversation, right? It's not really about what you're saying. It's there's certain things, mistakes people make, which I just kind of categorize under bad behavior / limit. Limits cannot be going beyond, and bad behavior is not my problem to deal with. I want nothing to do. You're not starting to disgust me with this stuff. As a kid growing up, though, these are one of the things that I did notice about the cussing, for example. It just seems so obvious. Like it's like what, like it's just like you're like, oh, everyone is still kind of going back and forth. It's funny, but we're getting to that time, Dr. Thunder, and perhaps Kaizo can throw in a word or two here as we close. Mr. IC3, also you out there with your logic models, looking for models and definitions and things like that. We're here talking about generals and kings. This is not you're over there being a little scholar, an accountant. Yes, I'm coming for you, Mr. IC3, with your definitions and let's say is a morality on the individual side and ethics on the group side. It's like no, within the context of what we're talking about, these things control both individuals and groups. Okay, what's relevant is that ethics has to do with ethics varies. One of the dimensions to give you models. I know you like models, right? One of the parameters in this models when you talk about morality and ethics is that morality is the one that tends not to change. Okay, giving you just kind of abstract, clinical kind of parameters, and ethics is the one that changes. One of the ways in which it changes is it actually changes from organization to organization because it's there. All of them are there to promote order and guide people's conduct. But within organization to organization, depending on what's being done, the kind of things that people want, there are different ethics. Ethics for lawyers, ethics for doctors, ethics for engineers. It changes, right? And so on and so forth. I could say. Now, it even goes all to the point of couthness that Dr. Thunder mentioned. In other words, etiquette is also akin to ethics, right? Within this kind of unchangeable to very, very changing and varied parameter that I'm describing, right? Etiquette is also part of the ethics. In other words, Dr. Thunder said, hey, some people might look at it as being uncouth if you were to do something. This is not what we do here in the inner circle, right? That's another way of kind of, keeping a certain kind of order that benefits a certain type of people. And those guys over there that chew with their mouths open, we don't let them in. Right? This is the relevant parameter, or shall I say the relevant distinctions here, because this is all directed towards action, Mr. IC3. And you're not gonna. It's not about your library of little definitions, sir. But anyways, Kaizo, what are your closing thoughts regarding the things that we've mentioned? And regarding the things we've mentioned, let me go ahead and talk about some. I'll give kind of like a brief paraphrase, right? I started that already in my explanation to IC3, but basically these codes are designed, codes of conduct that is, within these particular organizations, within these particular orders, are designed to keep certain things orderly, and orders have to do also with power, right? With those keeping the order, and it'll keep the incumbent power in there. Hence, if you want to have power and fluidity, to be able to move and not be chained and constrained by these ethical constructs, you need to understand that they are not at the level of quote unquote morality. Okay. And that you can break these ethical codes and still remain morally untarnished. And then we also talked about this concept within power of ownership, control, and possession. And the people who have possession and people doing the work, and we use Reddit mods as an example, or you as a salesperson as an example. You have the directors of the company trying to tell you what to do, okay? But they don't really have a lot of power because they don't have the possession of the client's number, relationship, and such and such. And you could leave with that client if you understood your power. And you should find your moves in such a way that you find yourself in positions within an organization that are adjacent to actual possession of stuff. You actually have the keys. You have the access to the client's purse strings and such. And then you can turn back at the people who try to control you and say, hey, I'm bringing in this money here. You shut up, right? This is what Reddit did. So this is the context that we've kind of been having a conversation on. So, Kaiser, what are your thoughts with all this? And also, Andrew, too.
Yeah, I think ultimately it depends on the power that you have. Let's say Andrew Tate's situation. Don't go around talking about how smarter you are than everyone at getting these girls to work for you. Ultimately, that's what led to his indictment and everything. Is like saying, oh well, Loverboy, movement, etc. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, there is an uncouthness about from more, let's say ethical perspective on you bragging about how you are manipulating other people. So ultimately, look, in general, I mean, if you use your brain will let you, and your brain will take you to, let's say, saving money. If let's say your IKE, you don't want to pay as much taxes as is written on the books, the clear tax regulations, okay? But you're not supposed to talk about how you avoid taxes. Even if it's legal, that's not really the point, because they'll get you on something else because you're giving too much information about your whole operations. So when you're doing all of that, even if you are breaking ethical standards here and there, don't talk about it, and don't talk about it at very, let's say, specific framework. Specify only the basics, don't go deep into it, because that's when they will come for you.
Yeah, definitely not step by step.
Yeah. Yep. That I think that's more or less where someone like Tate went by, because technically, legally speaking, he didn't do anything wrong. What he did wrong was talking about how he's manipulating people, and there's no law against manipulating people as long as they're adults and consented with, without kind of being forced to, or in a forced situation. These are not homeless people. The same reason why women break the pacts for prenup. He didn't do things in those situations, but the simple fact that he said he tricked them and then also didn't pay taxes with the other half of the money that he claimed he was paying taxes, that's enough to get him on a technical charge of loverboy, which is human trafficking, because he did communicate with people from different countries and convince them to come there under pseudo false pretenses that he's in love with them. And I guess that's the issue. The issue wasn't even the weird stuff he was doing. It was actually a very technical term. And the issue is he gave it away by speaking about everything, bragging about it, and then speaking of specific issues about his business. Whether it's true or not, it's irrelevant. That's what they got him on.
Not bad there. Dr. Thunder, what do you think about this thing about, not going out there and putting it all out there? Especially you mentioned, yeah, step by step. You might even say certain things that are like, hey, you can get these contracts by partnering with women so that you can have all these various other boxes that you can check to get government contracts. You can say that in your YouTube video. No one is going to beat you over the head. But is it kind of unethical to just get some nail salon because it's owned by a woman into your conglomerate of shell corporations so that you can get the benefits of? Yeah, it's unethical, right? And also it's the kind of thing that you might say on YouTube, but maybe not so much, maybe not more than that, right? Maybe not even up to the level of even, oh yeah, and this is her name, and this is the salon, and this is, now you're kind of like you're crossing the line. Right? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I said I didn't think that cussing was a sin, but I didn't say I was going to run into church and start cussing.
There you go.
Right. Yeah, don't behave badly, and because that's now the issue, right? It's like, okay, things will bite you in the ass. Just don't behave badly in the wrong context. And in relation to what's his name, Psyche 3, and differences in morality and ethics. Ethics is, as Ike explained, it's a code. It's an operative code in the real world. It's basically rules that you live by in order to sort of maintain whatever standard you have that's greater, like a moral standard. It's like society. That's why you get societies with different laws, right? But they all claim the morality is similar. So yeah, ethics is more on practice. Morality, you can kind of take it more on abstract and what you believe is right or wrong, versus how you act it out in the real world. So yeah, ethics is more action. Morality is more abstraction about ideas.
Yeah, that's the case. But I think the way that we were framing it in this discussion is ethics are more an external policy, conduct, rules that maybe an organization has, or even I don't know, society has their certain expectations that are there. In morality is like I said earlier, is more like the stuff that doesn't actually change. Ethics may change, morality doesn't change. In one sense, that
Can I ask a question then?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so let me frame two situations. I'll start with the Black Lives Matter one since it's easier. I'm a Black Lives Matter activist. I've helped raise $50 million this year. Before me, there was no $50 million. And I take $1 million and I buy myself a house. Is that unethical? So without me, there is no money. And I'm so yeah, that's an example of it. Is that unethical or is that okay?
Black Lives Matter is immoral. So so that trumps. No, I'm joking. No, this is a good point. It seems in this situation there are some specific policies that make it actually illegal for her to actually buy the property. And so I'd argue that it is unethical, is with respect to not following the policy. And then I'd also argue that it's immoral because of the
Was it falsehood?
because of the falsehood, because of the hiding, and because of the sort of moralizing, right?
Yeah.
All of the moralizing that she was doing while she was actually back here, living
Right,
large
but
with her.
I'm just reading. Apparently, IRS offers guidelines, but no regulations for how much an employee can pay themselves on non-profits. So, what if she pays herself that and says, "I'm the CEO. I need $1 million per year."
Let me step in here.
Maybe it was just like cussing in the church.
It's one of those TI tautological questions in the sense that you already described that these codes are codes, and then you're asking, I just did this thing, is it outside the code? It's like, dude, which code? And it's a black or white. It's an empirical question. It's not some kind of a conceptual question. It's either there or it's not. And why are you asking me? Okay, if it's within the bylaws and the this and the this and the tax, it's either there or it's not. If it's within a gray area, yes, then we can argue like lawyers. Right? I hope I make myself clear. This is not a if you is it ethical or not? Well, okay, which code of ethics? Yes or no? There is no question. Now, if there was a falsehood, as Dr. Thunder has brought up, now we're getting into the areas of okay, well, yeah, now it's immoral, and why were you hiding it and such. But hey,
Okay, let me
the
make
spirit
it
of your
easier.
question, the spirit of your question of hey, I come through, I bring this money, I could take all my 5 million, I could take the 50 million and go away and run away with it if I wrote, if also I stated that's what I wanted to do, or if it's in the bylaws that I can do whatever I want to do with the money and blah blah blah. There's nothing unethical about that.
So,
Okay.
but here's an issue, and here's an issue. This is a strange kind of issue. So, if it really wasn't, if there was no fear of impropriety, and if it wasn't for what am I saying? If there was no fear of looking like there was impropriety, and if it hadn't been for all the moralizing, so it's as if, see, a scammer probably with a clean conscience would have just taken the 50 million and left town. No one ever had to know who they were again. They don't care what the kind of devastation. They don't care about the people that it hurt, the relations. They don't care about any of that because they had a particular objective. Their objective was, I'm getting this 50 million and I'm getting out, and I don't care how many eggs I have to crack, blah blah blah. But the problem for this woman is that she wanted to still appear righteous, and that's why she wanted to still appear righteous, and that's where you have that's where the rub is. Because if she didn't want to appear righteous, then none of the issues of is this ethical or moral or any of the rest of that in this particular context, that wouldn't be an issue, right? But it's because of the moralizing. It's because she wanted to appear to be righteous. That's why it's an issue. Otherwise, she would be she would have bought an island and she'd be out there living large, and nobody would care because she disappeared.
What's the other question, Kaiser?
Yeah, right. So, yeah, that makes sense. The other question is, let's say Dr. Thunder is from a third world country. He's been invited to play at some kind of quartet, some kind of show, right, somewhere, because of his skills and also his story as a young black man, getting the skills, etc., right, from a certain neighborhood. Now he's not being paid. He's been asked to compose four 4-minute pieces, right, and record them. Not just compose them, but also record them. Now, Dr. Thunder is thinking, I want to sell these pieces at the event, right, after the gig. he notices after reading the contract, actually says all material is actually owned by these people. Okay, and then it reads more. It's like you're not really supposed to do anything with the material unless you have consent from the company sponsoring him attending. All they're doing is just paying for the recording studio time and materials cost, as well as the flight, and obviously staying in the hotel for a couple of days, etc. Right? So Dr. Thunder wants to still sell his music at this place. Obviously it's unethical because it's there's actually a legal contract which he can actually get sued. But assuming that actually Dr. Thunder does go ahead and maybe modify some of the material and then sells a separate material, which again wasn't stipulated, that you can't just sell stuff that wasn't necessarily sponsored by them, right? Here's the issue. So let's assume he sells the original pieces. The company obviously can sue him. Would it be obvious? What I'm asking is it immoral for the company to sue him, given that they didn't really pay him? This is now a morality question.
Dr. Thunder is directly mentioned in this, so I'm sure he's gonna.
Yeah. So yeah, it would be immoral if the company wouldn't pay me, but it wouldn't be unethical.
Right. I see.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So like the whole fair wage thing. You could say it's immoral to pay people in a way that the economy doesn't allow them to live a decent so-called lifestyle. But it's not unethical because they agree to terms which you and them agreed to. So it's interesting.
Nor is it illegal.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But then you ask yourself a question: well, should you provide work for people if you can't give them a decent standard? We're not talking about health or whatever standards for their health being maintained. I'm just mean like. So basically, if I offer a starving African $5 for 12 videos for them to edit for me, and I pay them that much, obviously that's underpaying them. Is it immoral? That's actually how much I pay someone that works for me. So is it immoral what I'm doing? Now here's my logic. My logic is, if I do any business, I have to make profit. I don't do non-profit businesses. So even if I'm making a profit of 20 cents, I don't want to be in the habit of doing business for charity. So am I immoral for offering only $5 for 12 edited videos?
Well, so there's like a nexus between maybe nexus is not the word. There's like maybe an intersection. There's a tipping point. Maybe that's what I want, between a person being able to survive with a particular wage and their own freedom to work for whatever wage they want to work for. So maybe they can't survive, but shouldn't it be their right to work for whatever wage they want to work for? Now, the issue there is obviously there's a power dynamic. The power dynamic is the person that's offering the employment, the job, they're not likely in the same live or die, bad straits kind of situation.
Okay.
And so perhaps you could argue that's not doing unto others as you'd have them to do unto you. So then you could say it's immoral, but it's not illegal.
Okay.
So it's
Let me add a perhaps important texture to this. So your responsibility for someone else's livelihood is what it comes down to. It's a responsibility question, right? You're like, well, how do I? Because if I just take the the amoral stance of like, hey, dude, I'm out here offering, this particular thing, and you give me this particular product. Why should what I'm trading here? I'm trading this coin X for Y. Why should XY transaction result in you living a certain kind of life, right? Where does this responsibility come from? If I just keep it like, oh, XY is all this kind of economic transactions going on here. So what would make the difference between me just saying, hey, I will pay you $2 if you pick up that broomstick, right? Why does the $2 have to amount to a certain percentage of whatever on your grandma's medical bills and the blah blah blah? Where does that come in, right? Thinking purely objectively, in my mind, that comes in when it's an opportunity cost question. In other words, if I'm giving you $2 to go stay in this cave 8 hours a day, every day, there's a huge opportunity cost. You cannot do other things to meet the requirements of your grandma's bill, right? So this is an important aspect when you talk about employment and you being responsible for someone else's stuff. Look, I can offer $2 all day, pick up boxes if it doesn't affect the rest of your life. But if I'm asking you to do something where there's an opportunity cost, I think opportunity cost here comes in huge and then comes the responsibility. Because now you're responsible. If I want this person to come into an office, sit there, XYZ, huge opportunity cost whereby they cannot do anything else, right? Then now the responsibility goes up. Would you agree that responsibility is an important aspect, and this aspect of opportunity cost is an important parameter for determining responsibility?
Yes, but I think I think that's a really interesting point you're making there. I would say then a separate element would be, does this person understand what opportunity cost is? Have you explained it? So there's an element of informed consent that has to occur in that sort of situation. Because if
100%. And by the way, I like that you bring these things up, because for me, I always like to be moral in these types of things that I not like. And I don't want to say that, oh, it's just natural for me to be moral, and that was the next thing I was about to say. But that sounds kind of like I'm capping. But this guy's
I also heard your cuss before. So.
Yeah, but I think, Ike, in your case, it's more of creating obviously opportunities in the future by treating employees well.
I know, because exactly, and I was about to give this model too in terms of to IC3 that was asking me, because Mr. Model guy, because I understand that it works. Morality actually works a lot of times, bro. Right? It works. Okay. I always talk about, hey, get these employees, pay them well, and train them well. Why? Because it works. It also is a moral thing to do. Okay. And I always expose, like, okay, here is what I'm demanding of you. Here's the amount of time it may take. And in other words, I always want that to balance, right? This opportunity cost and responsibility thing, I want it to balance. Ultimately, though, still it works. And to add another kind of to repeat something I say all the time, and for the sake of Mr. IC3, the model lovers out there, you see, people talk about morality and they say, hey, if not necessarily morality, let's talk about happiness, okay? Life being good, because it's still about, well, how should I live, right? The question of morality, how should I live, and how should I live a good life? We'll talk about the good life and they bring up this point of, how about if I just take heroin, right? And then the counter to that is, well, heroin feels good now, but doesn't feel good tomorrow. It'll ruin you, okay? So if you start thinking of yourself in this whole community idea of thinking of yourself in terms of as someone projecting yourself into the future, will start to narrow down the things that you would consider, good to do for yourself. If you also expand it into the people that you may be responsible for, right?
Right. I also think
and so on and so forth.
From what I've noticed, I think you also tend to be kind of judgmental in the same way, like what's his name? Dr. Thun mentioned earlier about do to others what you'd like to do unto you. I think you generally actually instinctively don't work with people that won't understand the or value the sacrifice of the moral sort of landscape that you create. I think you instinctively avoid the kinds of people who would never actually, let's say, have that grateful attitude or.
Again, 100%. you know how I roll in that regard. There's a sense that things have to be, yes, you talk about the consent. Consent is important. It's important to me too, because it's a moral aspect. And shout out to the libertarians represented here by Dr. Thunder. It's a huge deal, right? This kind of consent. Like if you've consented, blah blah blah, people should be informed in order to make the consent and all that kind of stuff. It's a big part, yeah.
Because I wanted to add this to Dr. Thunders as well. Like if you look at how a lot of men end up with some of these divorce cases, I don't look. I'm not blaming people, but I am saying that some of these very extreme situations is why were you around that kind of person? And yes, things can trigger that sort of behavior, but some of these behaviors where someone doesn't want you to see your kid at all, and you've not violated any sort of moral standards in that relationship, why was that kind of individual in your life for that time period? Go ahead, Dr. Tan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, speaking of libertarians, I'll be doing a panel discussion at the 2023 Freedom Fest coming up. It's in July. My session's July 13th. That's a Wednesday. And so that's going to be cool. And my band is actually playing at the conference too. So yeah, come and check it out. Those that are into that sort of thing. It is a libertarian sort of conference. That's the base of it, but everybody's there. The full range of political stuff, bunch of third party folks, Democrats, Republicans, everybody. So it's a good thing. It's going to be in Memphis. It'll be in Memphis this year. So pretty cool.
Let's start landing the plane here. Okay. Let's start landing the plane. I'm going to mention one thing. Mr. IC3 is out. Mr. IC3 can't help himself, I know, and I can't help but to attack him with his it's like the catechism, right? who these series of questions, or like the way St. Thomas, people used to write treatises, right? St. Thomas Aquinas, they ask the question and then they answer these questions and here are these premises, and then it's like just shut up. But to your point, to Mr. IC3 points about consent and transparency, I think that there's always layers of transparency. I don't believe in full transparency because that just means that now you have idiots looking over your shoulders. Do you want idiots, Dr. Thunder, looking over your shoulder saying, why did you do this? How come you did that? That's what full transparency is. Okay, full transparency is everybody gets to say everything. No, shut up. When physics is being discussed, there are people who should not even be in the room. It's just going to waste people's time, right? So
yeah,
let me finish my point regarding with the IC3, and then you do your thing and final thoughts and whatnot. But with regards to transparency, there's always levels to it, and I believe that opacity or opaqueness is required for certain groups to do what they need to do, because transparency, by the way, leads to groupthink, which leads to political correctness. There's a whole line there of transparency. Everybody, can be described. For example, the Byzantines' general problem does arise from transparency, because now I have to say the right thing because everybody's looking at me. Groupthink comes from that, right? And then boom, that's how you get this whole. By the way, shout out to conspiracy theorists out there, theorists. That's how you get the whole like Davos community agreeing on a set of things which no one actually espouses. Nobody actually comes out there and directs them and says, "Hey, we're gonna be on this issue. We're gonna think X. On this other issue, we're gonna think Y." No, it's just everybody mimicking and looking at everyone else in this kind of a little bubble of let's say the things that we expect other people to. So that's what transparency leads to. Not perfect, but within each of these little bubbles of transparency, right, there needs to be consent, right? But people who don't belong in the physics bubble, they don't need to be told anything, right? I'm a man of hierarchy. Keep them away. Anyways, go ahead, Kaiser.
Yeah, I was gonna say actually, this is more. I've always had this moral standard, but I think I'm I'm now sort of making sure that it's now practical. Because I've noticed, I used to kind of go around in circles and, reanalyze the same thing in a different way, but still really just looking at the same stuff over and over again. Anyways, I would say my main moral contemplation, apart from removing, the extreme bad people, right, who are just bad, right, bad for business, bad for life, just stupidly bad in a short time period, bad. Apart from those kinds of people, I think generally right now I am looking at the the quality of the soul a bit more. I used to think it's immoral for me to judge the quality of a human soul, but I think that's what I tend to do now. And one of the judgment criteria is grateful logic. Is this person someone that imbues something of gratefulness? The way I treat them, just a whole sort of interaction with that individual. Are they grateful or not? Do they have that biting the hand that feeds you sort of programming? And I don't mean this in a direct transactional sort of circumstance. I just mean, even in the abstraction. Yeah, so I'll say that's one of my criteria, but I am sort of accepting that different people really can be, at least within my own system, be judged on the quality of their soul. And there's no need for us to just kind of, create this one line of the extreme bad people in a short period of time and normal human beings. I think that's how you get in trouble. What do you guys think about that? Like, is it wrong for me to judge the quality of a human soul?
Well, Jesus says that you judge them by their works.
Okay.
You're allowed to judge people. We're told to. You're supposed to judge people by their works, and that's actually the only way that you would be able to peer into their soul anyway, is based on the work of their hands. What is their behavior? What they actually do, and it's less about what they say, right? It's about what they do.
Yeah, it's a doing part. Yeah, exactly.
But I agree with that, and I think that the particular thing that you're judging against, in other words, like what you mentioned about gratitude, is a very good parameter as well. Misery, deliverance, and gratitude. Heard Calvinists, well, not just some Calvinists. Shout out to Paul Vanderklay. He talks about this misery, deliverance, gratitude, which I'm going to steal and paraphrase in my own way here, which is that the moral arc is an arc of misery, deliverance, and gratitude, right? You're an emo guy, Kaizo, so I'm sure you know about misery, deliverance, and gratitude, right? And there's going to be series of these misery, deliverance, gratitude plays that play over through your life. Gratitude is a very important part of it, and the quality of a person's soul, if they live through, because misery is just going to happen no matter what, right? That's the arena we're in. Life is going to happen. And if they don't have any gratitude with a little bit of deliverance, and they can't find deliverance, it could be just deliverance in coming home. He's drinking a cold cup of water that day and appreciating the fact that you have good health and gratitude for that. If the person doesn't have that gratitude piece, that's a rotten person. Okay. And that, because this misery, deliverance, gratitude cycle happens over and over in micro and macro ways all through your life. The person missing that piece is you want to be very far away from them. Yes, judge them. And if you're not, I think perhaps you're not so, you questioning the instrument by which you judge them. Am I actually right? I think that's probably part of what you're talking about. How do I know for sure this is that person? For me, it doesn't really matter because you're not like an executioner, right? You're not killing them. What if you misjudge one
True.
out of 10? It's not consequential. Because the judgment, the consequences of your actions, of your judgment, typically is about whether you choose to deal with them in certain ways or not, right?
Mm.
So I choose not to do this transaction with you. Have I killed you? No. I'm not taking some responsibility for that.
You're condemning their soul to hell, man.
No, what the hell? I'm just not going to deal with you, bro. That's
I
it.
see. Right. But obviously, if Jesus refused to deal with these people, then he's wrong, because I guess he's like holding the path to salvation. So as long as I'm not creating a non-zero pathway or something. Sorry. And as long as it's a non-zero pathway that I'm interacting with them, I am not morally culpable in, sort of, I'm not being forced to maintain that interaction with them.
Let's take the professor, for example, the professor that we interviewed. And
oh yeah, I remember the professor.
have I really diminished his opportunity?
No.
One could say that actually I've probably accelerated his life by just cutting short this whole disaster that would have happened if I actually employed him, right? It's like
This guy was crazy. Yeah.
It's like, okay, I spotted a crazy guy whom like, okay, cool, he's competent, blah blah blah, but crazy from this perspective of judging character regarding certain types of things, right? And I'm just like, no opportunity with you over here. Have I killed him? No. There's so many other doors, so many other things, and now he can move on to find, whatever, right? And it might even be to his benefit that he missed this one. He might even learn and all that kind of stuff. So I have no qualms whatsoever with this kind of issue of thinking that, what kind of crazy hubris to think that I'm the final arbiter of whatever. It's like, no, I cut you off. It doesn't do anything. You just move on. There's billions of people in the world, bro. Move on to the next person you're going to exploit.
Okay. Yeah. I think I do see your point. So I think be more practical, and as long as I'm not standing in the door, the only door for him or her to pass through, I'm not really, I don't need to stay there, right? I don't need to smell the, yeah. Okay, makes sense. I think it's good because I like to make sure, like IC3, I do like to make sure I have a model that makes sense to me before acting on it. But I will say that I have previously allowed myself, and I think Dr. Thunder, you should probably, do a show about this kinds of stuff. A lot of men will probably, let's say, allow a woman who they clearly know after the first 2 months, her character is she's one of those kids. Like, have you ever had the situation when you see a kid, like a young kid, and you can just see some behaviors in them that that this is just gonna be this is just gonna get worse as they grow older. And I guess what I'm trying to say here is some of these women literally they've got really bad characters, right? Let's say the lack of gratitude, gaslighting you, all these characters flaws which after 2 months becomes apparent. Why do men still remain in those situations? Forget the fact she's a woman, just as a relationship with anything. Why don't men
but that's the reason, because she's a woman.
All right.
That's the reason. I mean, obviously the only reason that you would deal with certain kind of behavior is if you believe that it's worth dealing with, because you're so thirsty.
So something
that you think that it's worth it.
Right. I see. Okay. That obviously makes sense.
And it's a self-deprecation. It's a just certain kinds of stuff is just not. And the thing is that as you get older, it becomes easier to cut stuff off, because part of it is because physiologically you're not the same as you were when you were younger. When you were younger, you had even more of the poison coursing through your veins, convincing you, of things that were dumb, to do. You had more of that stuff coursing through your veins. As you get older, you have less of it. Plus, you have some bad experiences, and then the combination of the two things for most men will level them out, so they start making better decisions once they get to a certain age. What would be really beneficial is if there was a way to impart that older brain into a younger person, so that they didn't have to go through that stuff to get there. But that's just what it is. But yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
But folks got to be careful, man. It's wild out there. All right.
We have definitely gone past the time, gentlemen. Give us your closing thoughts, Kaizo. Give us your closing thoughts on this notion that being ethically ambiguous is necessary for success in some ladders and to bust through certain glass ceilings.
All right. First, I thought I couldn't spell, but so you meant ambiguity, not ambiguity. Okay, I was thinking No, maybe this is a new word that I don't know. But anyways, from the title, so I would say that you know, whenever you're involved in an ethical sort of situation or situations that require it to sort of process, I would say speak less, say less, right? And you move accordingly to the law, but say less. That's all.
Yeah, there you go. And you said less. There you go. Okay, so Dr. Thunder. Closing thoughts and oh, you done Two Dads React this week? I keep
Oh
forgetting when
no, Thursday. That's Thursday.
Thursday. Yeah, it is
Yeah,
Thursday.
so that'll be tomorrow.
Do you know what you guys are going to be doing?
Not yet. Not yet. But
Okay.
there's a few big sort of events, big stories that yeah, it'll be something geopolitical, something on the verge of conspiracy, and some things that we can, you know, I don't know, what is it? Bloviate? Is it bloviate? Is that the word?
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. But yeah, folks, come on over. You know what's happening. I'll be doing a show in the morning. Car Thunder in the morning. Could actually be in my studio doing that, but those have been going well. Folks seem to dig those. So come and check that out. And then Two Dads React, we'll be doing one of those. And then Friday, another Car Thunder that will be an actual panel show. So folks can get ready for that. And we'll be doing Case Closed on Ike's channel at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday. We had a great show this past Sunday. It was a Father's Day kind of special. We're keeping it moving, keeping it grooving. But yeah, this ethical ambiguity thing, this is interesting. Of course, we have Andrew Tate pictured. Now, obviously, he took that to the extreme, and there's a lot of space and distance between where the normie bean counter, ham and egg or whatever, where they are and where Andrew Tate is. There's a lot of space between those two extremes. And if you want to climb, then you're going to have to be able to create a structure that your morality is not offended by. Create an ethical context that your morality is not offended by. Otherwise, I mean, you get to where you want to get to, and you've done a lot of things that you're not proud of, and that's going to make it harder for you to enjoy your success. So, for me, talking through a lot of these issues, it may seem like tedious and boring and all of that, but it's actually very much imperative, very much critical. I need to be able to justify what it is that I'm doing. I need to be able to make sense of what it is that I'm doing. And since I am a climber, I need to have a context, a view, a perspective of these policies, rules, procedures, social norms, cultural norms, all of this kind of stuff, laws, policies, You know, all of this kind of stuff, I need to have a way to view that stuff so that when I push against it, it's not offending my, it's not pricking my conscience, but rather I will feel emboldened as if I'm doing the right thing by pressing against those things. So, but you know,
Shout out.
but that takes
Shout
some
out.
thinking. Yep.
And as we leave, Bitcoin 20% up in the past month. It's crossed 30K for about the second time this past year. And if you're wondering why that might be the case for the 1% of the 1% who pay attention to crypto crap, BlackRock, this massive real estate investor. BlackRock owns, I don't know if they own most of the real estate in the United States, but they own a massive chunk. They're huge. Just Google BlackRock, right? For the money and conspiracy theory folks out there, they're good. Mr. IC3, go ahead and check out BlackRock. But BlackRock just applied for a Bitcoin ETF, right? So here's what just happened. FTX collapsed. The SEC is going after Coinbase and Binance and crushing the little guys. And this is an important point to our show here about the ethics, right? And keeping certain incumbents alive. BlackRock, after they just got to hit Coinbase with a lawsuit, BlackRock comes in and says, hey, we want a license to sell Bitcoin, right? You think they're going to be denied? No, BlackRock's not going to be denied. BlackRock is the incumbent. BlackRock runs the show. Well, BlackRock has funded everybody's campaign since time immemorial. They are the guy, right? BlackRock is that guy. BlackRock is going to start selling Bitcoin. They're going to get the clearance. This is the beginning of traditional finance kind of getting their foothold in certain aspects of the crypto industry. And it's all, and they told Coinbase that they violated all kinds of ethics, that they're doing this and they're doing. BlackRock's not going to get told any of that. Things going to happen quite differently with BlackRock. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, maybe we'll touch upon that at some other time, or might be a part of Case Closed just somewhere. But anyways, check out Bitcoin, $30,000. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, what do we say? We don't have a sign. We need to go for a sign off or something. But peace. We're out.
Peace.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what was behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking, with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannon could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.